What's happening, world? It's Kyra and Ben again. Ben has given me the reins to host another episode, so strap in. So we've been covering a bunch of variety of films lately. I know we've been on a little bit of a hiatus, but we are back and we've listened to you guys. So we are going to dive into some suggestions that were given to us. So today, starting off, we're going to do Sadar Udham. This is a movie from 2021. So I missed this movie during its release. I have Amazon Prime. I watch a lot of things on Amazon Prime. Totally missed this title when it came. But then through watching it and doing research, I didn't realize how heavy accoladed this movie was. It won a bunch of smaller film awards and things like that. And it is based on a true story, very powerful. Now, Ben, what is your history with the film?
The suggestion came through YouTube, and I looked it up and I watched it, and I had no clue about
any of it.
This massacre or any of the stuff that happened. It was, for me, it was devastating. I was like, oh my God. It was just traumatizing.
Traumatizing, I think, is one of the best words for it. Obviously, not a spoiler. This movie is based in truth, but you've listened to our podcast before, so you do know that we do cover the whole film and we do spoil. So
Spoil.
So this movie follows this one man who goes by a variety of aliases, one of them being Sadar Udham. And he is fighting for his freedom, and he is a real person in real life. And he did massacre Michael O Dwyer, who was a lieutenant for the British Empire and who had rule in India. He was a governor in India, and he approved and allowed a massacre to happen of, I think it said 2 million people, men, women, and children. What did it say at the end?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if it was 2 million. The massacre happened, but I don't think it was it 2 million? It might have been 2 million overall.
Overall.
But in that one incident, I think it was 2,000
that died
and injured. It was
awful. So during this time, the British Empire they were holding curfews. They were holding no assemblies. People of 2 or more couldn't gather. It was very strict. And so without warning, and we can get into the psychology of the British soldiers later. The second one more so than Michael O Dwyer. We see them and they say, we're not going to give a warning. They know not to gather, which is kind of wrong. Yeah. I feel like if you're going to open fire on people, you should absolutely give them a warning. So then, yes, open fire onto this huge open space of people. Peaceful protest. Like we had said, it was men, women, and children. And so this is obviously what the movie talks about. This is our main character's kind of catalyst to start his avenging and fighting. Not fully, because we do see him with Bharat Singh earlier. He is arm in arm with him, but this sort of pushes him further into leaving India to hunt this man down in England. And it takes him 6 years.
Yeah. His girlfriend
dies.
She couldn't talk.
Yeah.
She was at the massacre, and he couldn't find her.
I know.
Because of all the bodies. So you never know if he actually found her.
I don't think he did.
Yeah, because they were just covering people up with blankets and whatever they could to cover them up for the dead bodies. So really scarred him. Because he spent 7 hours pulling wounded and dying people to this mediocre hospital that they threw together, and people were dying, and it was just traumatizing for him. I mean, of course, he was already trying to be a freedom fighter, but they were peaceful freedom fighters. They didn't want any kind of violence. But then, to lose the person you love, and then to experience all that bloodshed and loss, and to see all the death.
I would be pushed to the edge to assassinate the person that did this if I spent 7 hours pulling dead children from a pit.
Yeah,
that would absolutely there was, and I think the British police officers. So one thing I really appreciated about this movie was that it is told in flashback. So the story jumps around all over time. And so we get this story right at the end of the film when he is speaking, kind of confessing before he dies, to one of the main police officers that was handling his case, I would say.
Yeah.
And super emotional moment. And you can see at the end of it that this police officer does not want to kill him. He actually shakes his hand.
Yeah, well, Winston Churchill, when we was told about this, condemned it. He did not approve it.
But then he did allow it.
But see, that's the thing. You ever see Braveheart?
Yeah, I saw Braveheart.
So when the father says, condemn it publicly, but back it privately, that's the first thing that jumped into my mind. I was like, is this the same thing?
It is the same thing because, and I mean, you hear it time and time again throughout the film because I thought one of the style of this movie and the directing was very good, and we're going to get into that. But the use of diegetic radio and having those broadcasts throughout to kind of give exposition and story to tell kind of where everyone's minds was at. I mean, he did commit the assassination in 1940, right kind of during the pinnacle of World War II. So fear was abound. Yeah. And I think to sort of get into that mindset of what was happening, having those like radio clips and those like newspapers, I think really led to it because you're seeing oppression and you're seeing the tyranny of the British Empire from one scope. And then you kind of see them in a state of like fear, which I think is interesting. Not saying it's justifiable, not saying I ever pity the British Empire, but it is very interesting, I think, to have both of these things happening at the same time. And then you see him making deals with the IRA. You see him trying to make deals with the Soviet Union. And I think it's really interesting that all these people recognized and were with the exception of the Soviet Union, were on the receiving end of British tyranny. Yeah. Yeah. And I love the idea of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I think with the IRA, especially, that was very prominent. And I thought very interesting. And I would have never had even guessed that.
Yeah. I like the fact that it shows that like not all British citizens were down with what was happening in India. I mean, it's just like, not all Germans were Nazis. I mean, it just goes, not all the group, the British citizens were like, okay, let's just torment these people and treat them like dirt. I mean, so it showed that like there's good and bad in everybody.
There's good and bad in everyone, but at the same time, I feel like if you're looking at like the colonization and oppression that the British Empire inflicted in India, it's much different.
Oh, yes, 100%.
It is. I mean, there's a line in the movie that he's saying right before he gets shot, Michael O Dwyer, where he goes, India, similar to Africa, is the white man's burden. And I think that is just such an insane notion to have, to like think that you have to go into these. I mean, it is an imperialistic mindset. Like you have to go into these countries that you deem to be different or unworthy or uncivilized and go in and create tyranny and oppression. I think is insane. And to be like, this is our just calling is crazy. This is a whole different rant. We can get back to the movie. But I think it was really interesting that they included that. One thing that I thought was crazy about this movie that I did not expect coming, because I always go into these films blind and then I do research after. But when he's working for him,
yes,
crazy.
Yeah. He says that listening to him speak, he had no remorse. He didn't care.
He didn't care.
Like it was nothing to him to kill those people.
But then at the same time, so yes, I agree. He did not care. And I'm not going to defend this man at all because he was an awful, awful person. But I felt like when they were speaking and the way that he was rationalizing what happened, like, oh, people could have gone to the hospital. And he was like, no, there was a curfew. There's no gathering. You inflicted all these laws that would help us die and would not support us into getting help. And I think you see O'Dowd kind of saying this as like a way to rationalize what he did. Not saying that he felt remorse, but I do think that rationalization was supposed to plant like a seed of doubt. Like,
yeah. Well, he ended up, there was an original general that was supposed to go do it. And he's like, no, I want Dyer.
Yeah.
Because he knew Dyer would do it. He's like, this guy is going to go without, and he's going to execute all these people. But then when Dyer did it, afterwards, he's sitting there, and this is supposed to be all documented facts. Like, everything that this movie had was, like, documented. Things were said, like, everything was put down. And Dyer says, I did right? He's talking to the guy, and the guy's
talking
like,
to the general,
the guy's like, you did what you were supposed to do as a soldier. And he's like, but it was right? So, like, he's trying to justify in his own mind that what he just did was okay.
Exactly. And, I mean, I have never been in a military position in a wartime. I've never been in any kind of position in a wartime. So I can't speak to those difficult decisions that need to be made. But I can tell you for a fact, I don't think a massacre like this is ever the difficult decision you think it is. No. And it's never necessary.
No. It's women and children and little kids and grandparents. It was a peaceful protest.
It was a peaceful protest under Gandhi. Like, yeah. I mean, I don't know. So I understand. I feel like all these people that were a part of it. And I think what was super interesting, and the movie didn't get into this, And when I was doing research, maybe I was looking in the wrong spots. I didn't really get into this, but they were Indian citizens that were firing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I would have loved to like listen to like the psychology of like that, because it does kind of fall into that same idea of like the Germans that were Nazis that were just the people that like, and I'm using quotes because you guys can't see, just following orders.
Right.
But this I feel like fully falls into that. And I think it's a super interesting idea to talk about. Like, are you just following orders, or are you following orders to get something else? We see this in RRR, a previous movie that we have covered, where Ron was following orders to get into a position of power to steal guns. Not saying every one of these people have to have this noble story like that, but I would love to know. I would find that super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's like any country, even in America during the slave time. Some of the slaves would tell on the other slaves that were trying to run, because they had a sense of loyalty to the masters. And I think that's the same thing with these soldiers. They felt like they had to be loyal to the masters.
Right.
And so they did whatever they told them, and they thought that they would show favor in their eyes, and it's like the wrong thing.
It is the wrong.
Yeah, it's like no, I'm not saying this, but like if you beat a dog, the dog loves you no matter what. He's gonna love you, and he's gonna have that look in his face, like no matter what, he loves you. And you're hurting him, but the dog loves you. And these people kind of like, they loved the British government. They loved what they thought was okay for them. If that makes any sense.
I think they entrusted the British government where they shouldn't have.
Right. Blinded.
I think. Yeah.
Blind love.
Or just like love out of fear. I mean, there's so many different things it could have been.
Yep.
And I love, so let's get back into the full story. So this is the event that the whole movie is based around, but we don't see this until, I would say, the final 30 minutes.
Yeah, which was awful.
It is. And I mean, we were talking a little bit off recording about what scene had the most emotional punch for us. And we were talking about when he's like pulling these bodies out. It's very visceral and emotional. But for me, what got me was right at the end, when you see all the people doing the work to honor and clean the dead, and you see all these thousands of bodies like lined up, just like ready for burial and ready for ceremony. And to me, I thought that, and then you see him go into the water to try to like cleanse himself. To me, that was so emotional and so impactful, because I think it was the movie's way and like the director's way and the writer's way of honoring these people, because the British government never has. And it says at the end that the British never has ever apologized.
Yeah, I believe, I want to say it was 2015, they acknowledged the act, but they didn't apologize.
No, They acknowledged it, but they didn't apologize, which to me feels like even worse. They're like, oh yeah, we did this.
Yeah. Deal
with it. Like, to me, that's awful. But so yeah, I thought that scene at the end when this camera like pans out and you see all these different bodies, it's horrifying, but it is, I mean, the movie is a beautiful story about how this man fought for his freedom and for the freedom of India, and how he never strayed from that, no matter. And I mean, I thought it was so funny when the government was like, what was he doing for 6 years? He was planning, and he was like, I did this by myself. Like, and they're like, there's no way that you could do this without an organization behind you.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so funny, because it's like, just because you can't do anything without the British Empire doesn't mean that one person's like anger and passion and like honor and like if you have good intentions can actually drive you to like do something meaningful like this.
Yeah.
Not saying that killing someone is ever meaningful, but I think in a political stance like this,
yeah,
it is. And I think throughout, like, you see parts of his trial, and you see him when he's talking to like the detectives, and he's always like, I don't have a problem with all British people. I have a problem with the British being in India.
Right.
And he says that over and over and over again,
right.
And everyone's like not listening.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things in life. People just don't listen.
People don't listen.
Just don't listen. I mean, the British justified being there because they were the better power. They thought, oh well, we can be here because we're the British government, we're the British empire, and we can do this to these people because they're lesser than us, and no one's lesser than anybody.
No. Yeah. And that is an imperialistic, racist mindset to have.
Yeah.
Because, and I mean, I hate when they like this is like the terminology they use, but when they use words like savages and savagery and like they're killing and looting each other. It's like, no, they're not. You're creating systems where these people can no longer thrive.
Yeah.
You're literally killing them, and you're pillaging their earth.
Yeah.
And what they're building. It's like, just because you can't imagine living off the earth, and just because you don't know how to live off the earth, and you don't understand and have like a rich connection or cultural sort of like, I don't know, like representation or ideology. And there's, I mean, I don't know if I'm being clear with what I'm trying to say, but it feels like just the British just see something that they want and then they just destroy it.
Yeah. They take it for themselves.
They do. And I mean, we see this with India, multiple countries of Africa. They tried to do it to the U.S., but
yep.
And I mean, I would just say the U.S. is now a bunch of idiots that tries to do it to everyone else. So the white man doesn't learn. I think this is the message.
Yeah. And Kyra and I, neither one of us are Indian.
I'm not Indian,
race.
no.
Yes, so neither one of us are. And growing up, my limited amount of Indian history was Sinbad. I mean, I watched Sinbad in the Eye of the Tiger. I did watch Gandhi. I just want to say that I did watch Gandhi, Gunga Din. So like but that's what they were showing us. So we didn't have this movie or this documentary back then to show us what was going on in India. We kind of knew, but we didn't know the extent. Does that make sense?
I would say I mean, obviously we grew up in very different times with very different sort of like upbringings. But yeah, I mean, I don't know much about India receiving or getting their independence from Britain. I don't know much about what happened there. I think through films like this and the research we've done, I've learned so much more than I was ever taught in school.
Oh, yeah.
I think that is a failing of the U.S. schooling system.
Yeah.
But I've definitely, and it's opened my eyes. I was having another conversation about how I've been watching more of these types of movies and how interesting it is, because when I was younger, I would watch, like, my favorite Bollywood movie was Bride and Prejudice, which is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, which was because I like Jane Austen, so I sought this out.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen like much more out of that. And it's just so enriching for me to watch these films and to learn and to do the research and to learn more, because it is broadening your worldview and your scope. And these films are great. I mean, I love this style of movie. So if we look stylistically at films, regardless of what they're telling, I love a non-fictional political thriller, which I would this is what this is.
Yeah.
I love a story that's told out of time, because I think it's really interesting to watch how a character development develops through different points, and then you can kind of piece that together in the present, or what we're seeing in the present. And I think that technique for this film absolutely was necessary to hit every emotional point and every emotional key that they did.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there was any way to show his progression as a person outside of that. I mean, so much happened in 6 years. And even before that.
Yep.
I mean, I would have also watched a movie about him being younger, working with Bharat Singh.
Yeah.
And then he died.
Yeah. Yep. He got hung.
He got hung. He went to prison and was hung. So, I mean, I would watch or read or learn about any one of these stories, because to me, they're 100% more fascinating than any movie I've ever seen about World War II.
Yeah. Bharat Singh, there's an interesting part in the movie where they say, when you get your freedom, what do you want to do? He's like, I want to smoke a cigar and I want to watch a Charlie Chaplin movie.
Yeah.
So, like, for me, it struck me as, like, funny, not funny, haha, but it's stuff that, like, American citizens take for granted, like, our freedom, like, to smoke a cigarette or smoke a cigar and watch a Charlie Chaplin movie means nothing to us. But this person who is fighting for his freedom, fighting for just to survive, and what's he want to do when it's all over? Have a cigar and watch a Charlie Chaplin movie.
But I loved that, because I thought but I also think that seems so important in the context of this podcast and how we talk, because it shows how universal film is, and it shows how universal messages resonate, because at some point, no matter how different we are all the same.
Right. 100%.
And I think that was like just a super interesting kind of way to throw that in there, of how they're connected to the Western world outside of the British rule, because it is just something different and fun. It's a Charlie Chaplin movie. Yeah. You can watch it and there's no bearing on it.
Yeah. And like for me, like I was saying, growing up, watching movies about India, like basically they showed belly dances, they showed like exotic. They didn't show all the stuff that India went through during the British colonization. They just showed like this exotic land where like the girls dressed in like little skimpy outfits and dressed like and danced and stuff, and they made it exotic and but they didn't show like the pain and suffering and sorrow.
No.
Yeah.
Of course not. And I think also those were not the type of movies that would showcase that. And I think too, when you see early media, especially from a Western point of view, you see a lot of how do I pronounce the word? Fetishization? When they fetishize something.
Yes, fetishization.
Fetishization, thank you. I cannot pronounce anything, as our listeners know.
Okay, it's pretty sad when I say something and you don't. You're supposed to be the smart one on this one. I'm comic relief. You're the smart. We got to get this right here, Kyra.
I know. But you know what I'm saying? I think there was a lot of that sort of thing happening where you just see, beautiful women and belly dancing and, I don't know, incense. I don't know, whatever else you see in these types of things. And it's not that. That is a very Western point of view to look at culture. And that's why I'm so excited that we're watching all these movies, because it's looking at Indian independence. It's looking at Indian culture through the eyes of people who grew up there and lived it and understand it and understand these experiences better than a Westerner would. And I think that's important, because I think time and time again, we do see these sort of like white savior stories that I don't think happened. I mean, they probably did. I don't know. But I'm sick of them. So that's why I love stories like this, where they celebrate actual heroes and they uplift like actual voices, because I am sick of everything else.
Yeah, understand. And you're 100% right. This movie opens up a lot of eyes. If you watch it, you'll see like just how awful one incident can be and traumatizing that one incident can be. But it's one incident that like basically scarred thousands of people.
I mean, it wiped out generations of people in one act of violence. It's awful and it's heartbreaking. And I think that sometimes when we think of Bollywood films from a Western point of view, we think of them in the sense of very like fun, and we think of the musical numbers, and we think of dancing and singing, and we think of all these things, and it is glossed over. But I think in a movie like this, where it is very serious and there is no dancing and there is no singing, it's just a straight movie. It is so impactful.
Yeah. The two little girls. I'm going to tear up thinking about it, but they're two little girls, when they are just holding onto each other, dragging each other, and one gets shot in the back and the other one's like dragging her, and then they're trying to protect each other. And it is, I know it's fictional, but it's based off truth.
It's based off truth, and it is. This movie, I will say, is not for the faint of heart, but everyone should see it.
Yeah, especially like when he finds the grandfather.
And then when he's talking, and he's gonna lie to the grandfather about how his granddaughters are still alive, even though they are both dead. Yep. And as he is trying to soothe this grandfather, the grandpa does pass away.
Yep.
And I mean, to take on that emotional toll as someone who is just woken up and thrown into this horrific scene, and then taking on this emotional toll of trying to ease these people who are dying. I mean. And then you see the pregnant woman screaming, looking for her husband, and like coddling him, his like dead body. It is so gutting to see, and it is because it's true, and you know what happened, and I think to see now that like the British have never apologized for it, there is still trauma in that city because of it. Like, you wiped out generations of people and families. It is something that is horrible, but it is an act of war that happens time and time again. Yep. And I mean,
7 hours.
7 hours.
7 hours of carrying people to listen. He doesn't just carry them like a few feet. He carries them blocks. Carrying, and he ends up getting like a wheelbarrow, like some kind of wheel thing, and he's pushing these people. And this is this one guy struggling to try and save as many people as he can.
Well, there are other people that are doing it too.
Yes, other people are doing it, but it shows like him specifically for 7 hours, like doing this. And he doesn't find the one he loves.
He doesn't. He never finds her. I would assume never loves again.
Yeah.
And just goes to Britain. And I think his support system in Britain was really interesting. I think how careful he was very interesting, and how well thought out he was. Like, the British, once this happens, they try to spin the story of like, oh, he's a crazy madman. Oh, he's this, he's that. No, he was He was very smart, very calculated. And everything I think he did had a purpose. I mean, he could have killed this guy time and time again when he worked with him.
Options.
He had so many options, and he didn't.
Nope.
Because he knew the message that he had to make, and he knew it was at stake.
Yeah, and they even say, what would make someone who's never killed
kill? And
that would
100%. And I think that's what we see at the end when the police officer then shakes his hand.
Yeah.
And then he goes
to be hung.
He is executed. And then he's holding something in his hand, and it's a photo of him when he was happy, before all of this happened. And the same police officer takes it and holds on to it and kind of keeps it. Yeah. Well, in my mind, keeps it. And I don't know. I thought it was really powerful. I thought it was really interesting. And I thought it kind of showed this bond of like respect where this guy was like, because throughout this whole thing, he is never rude or disrespectful to anyone.
No, even when they're beating him.
Even when they're beating him.
Yeah. He did what he had to do.
He did what he had to do. And
he didn't like it. He even says, I don't enjoy what I did.
Yeah.
He said, but it had to be done. And the guy didn't make it easy on him. I mean, the guy, whenever he talked to the guy had no remorse about what he did. He's like, look, I did it because it had to be done.
But here's the thing. I think even if he had shown remorse, he would have still killed him.
Probably.
I believe that was so ingrained in his character.
Right.
I really do.
Vengeance.
And I think this guy deserved to die.
Oh yeah.
And I think what was interesting in this movie now, tonally, story-wise, this movie, but the only other movie you can relate it to right now is RRR. But this movie and RRR, I think is so interesting on how they depict the British. So in RRR, we see every British person to be evil, with the exception of whatever the girl's name was. Emily, Jordan, I don't know. Pick a white name. Yeah. So we see every British person being evil except for her.
Right.
But in this movie, we see the British be evil, say evil things, do evil things, but we see another side of them. We see it with the police officer. We kind of see it with these generals second-guessing themselves. But it's like the other lady, another white lady, can't remember her name, but we see it with her, the activist. We see it with her. We see it throughout like everyone that he kind of had an interaction with. And I mean, he was able to be a successful businessman. He was able to get a job in this guy's house. Like, he was well respected.
Yes. Yep.
He kept to himself and was quiet, but he was well respected by his peers because he stood up for them. We see that in the factory. I mean, this guy was do the right thing.
Yeah.
That was what he was all about. But my point being was, I thought it was interesting that this movie shows kind of two sides of the British, whereas in RRR, we just see the evil side.
Right.
Not saying that right now the British are evil and imperialism is evil and tyranny is evil and what they've done is evil. It is just an interesting movie choice to show the duality of man in something so horrific.
100%. And it wasn't just like, it wasn't just the British, the Spanish, the French.
Oh, the French.
It was basically the superpowers at that time and how they colonized the places they took over.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, I don't want everybody to think, well, just bashing the British.
I am.
Well, for this movie, yes, but it's not just the British. Like America's
trying to pull it now.
I'm saying there's a lot of places that are doing it right now. Russia's doing it right now in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So it's like the old adage, like, if you have the power, you have the justification, and you don't.
You don't. The way that men in power go about enacting their power and enacting ways to get more power, to me, will always be disgusting. And it's something I will never support. I feel like on this podcast, we speak a lot about injustice, and there is a lot of injustice that happens at the hands of white people in power. I think it is a trend that has happened throughout history, and it is a trend now that is still happening.
100%.
And it's just something that we need to get a hold of. So I loved this movie. I will recommend it to everyone I talk to because I think it is a super powerful and interesting movie, and it's important.
Yep.
So this movie, like I said at the beginning, we did not stumble across this. This was actually requested to us by you guys, so we do want to give the shout outs.
Okay. The first person is Vasudha Sharma, I believe that is, and then Amar Deshmukah, and then Bold Truth. All of this was on YouTube, and if I got it wrong, I'm sorry. I just like I don't know the pronunciations, and I am American, and I am not Indian, so if I got it wrong, I apologize. But I do want to send shout-outs to you guys, because we do listen.
We do listen, and we love them. We have a lot of fun things on the docket, but we do have a lot of more suggestions coming in. So continue to give them, you guys. We can't grow with our film library without the help of you. We try to watch as much as we can, but we are human and things do slip through the cracks. I will say again, I love this movie. Thank you guys for listening to us, supporting us, suggesting this. It was an incredible film. Absolutely. Someone said it would change my top 10. Definitely has. It is a powerful, well done film.
Oh, I 100% agree. Seek it out.
You guys got a easy in right there. Amazon Prime. Don't support Jeff Bezos, but it's on Amazon Prime. All right. Well, I guess, Ben, you got anything else?
No, like I said, I'm glad I got to watch it. It was very emotional. It opened my eyes to a lot of things. England, just apologize.
Just apologize.
Just apologize. I mean, you did it. It happened. I mean,
own up to it.
Own up to it. I mean,
you did say you did it. Yeah, now say you're sorry.
Right? Just sometimes you just gotta say sorry.
Sometimes you just gotta say sorry. All right. Well, we'll catch y'all next time on What's Happening.